And we check in with Hank South right now, maybe the second most busiest person when it comes to Alabama football recruiting, as the Crimson Tide looks to put a wrap, essentially, on this 2019 recruiting cycle. Hank, a lot of news from over the weekend as we bring you on here on Southern Fried Sports. Starts with a couple of flips in favor of Alabama in that secondary specifically, and then right through Clay Webb on Monday. He makes his announcement, the five-star offensive lineman from Oxford, Alabama, casts his lot with the Georgia Bulldogs. No shortness of news, I guess, for you here, Hank, in the last 48 hours or so.
No, absolutely not. You know, you try to go to a Saturday night graduation with your family, and you know it all breaks loose on Saturday evening. But major news on Saturday night. I mean, with all the official visitors on campus, this kind of stole the show as far as notes coming out of the weekend. Two big time flips for Alabama. One in five-star safety Dax Hill, the number one safety in the country, who, I think that caught a lot of people off guard. We've talked about Bama staying in contact with him. They still were recruiting him, but everyone felt he was pretty firm with Michigan. But clearly he was not, and he changed his mind and flipped to Alabama, which is where we thought he was going to choose back when he originally made his commitment to the Wolverines in September. So talk about a big-time addition for Alabama. I mean, this kid, he's drawn comparisons to Mink Fitzpatrick. One of my favorite recruits in the class. I've said that all through the summer and the fall, even after he committed to Michigan. I think he's one of the most sure-thing recruits in the 2019 cycle. So big-time get for Alabama, and they didn't stop there. A couple hours later, four-star cornerback Jeffrey Carter, or I should say Scooby Carter, flipped his commitment to Alabama from Texas A&M. And that was more of one we thought could happen. He's been a guy we've had in that group of guys we think could commit to Alabama next. He's been kind of wavering with Texas A&M, visiting Alabama a couple times this fall. So another really big-time get as well. And so with that, you think Bama's done with their recruiting at defensive back, but if you've been following Bama online, they might not be. There's still some guys out there they're visiting. Maybe some more guys are trying to flip, but certainly that was the big news coming out of the weekend, and then on into this week as the staff kind of heads towards the early signing period next Wednesday.
Kind of tough to get a read on Clay Webb, it seemed like, throughout the process. We had talked about the Oxford offensive lineman on multiple occasions here on the program, reading your coverage at BamaOnline.com, Tim Watts' coverage at BamaOnline.com, even leading up to his press conference on Monday morning. Did you have a strong sense either way which way Clay Webb might have ultimately go?
On Monday morning, of course, it came down to Monday morning. We went ahead and changed our crystal ball predictions to Georgia. I think over the weekend, I do think leading up to his decision on Monday, it was kind of a toss-up between Alabama and Georgia. But this recruitment has it's been one of the more interesting ones to follow as far as news switching up on you. For a kid that doesn't really say much. This time last month, I think a lot of people thought Clemson was the leader. Auburn was always in it, but it always stayed Alabama and Georgia from what we were hearing, and we kind of maintained that, and that's what it was in the end. He said Bama finished number 2 in his recruitment, but ultimately I think his family ties to Athens won out for him. He has a very close relationship with Sam Pittman, the offensive line coach at UGA, so I think he was just a little bit more comfortable there. And so he went ahead and popped. So, didn't really have a great feel on it until the end. We had our crystal ball picks on Alabama for, I feel like 2 years, just because, he never really gave us indication of why we shouldn't. But, we always knew Georgia was there. We knew they were a real threat, and that's where he picked yesterday morning.
So as far as the offensive line goes, Alabama's still in on some big-time guys, right, including Evan Neal, the 5-star tackle from IMG. I don't think anyone's going to shed a tear for Alabama when it comes to this offensive line class, even without Webb.
Oh, absolutely not. The guys that have committed on board already, that's a very strong group, and that's kind of been the case since the summer. They've had most of those guys on since the summer. But yeah, they have a chance to finish strong. The two names that are remaining that we're watching, Evan Neal, 5-star tackle from Florida, and Darnell Wright, 5-star tackle from West Virginia. I think Bama has long been in good shape for Evan Neal. There's been a lot of buzz lately. He took an official visit to Georgia over the weekend. People are kind of watching that visit, but I still think this one's coming down to Alabama or Miami. And I think Bama's still in a good spot for him when he announces his decision next Wednesday. Darnell Wright, a little bit more interesting one, but the good thing with Darnell Wright in Alabama is he's not making a decision until February. And so that's more of an Alabama-Tennessee battle. We'll know what happens with Evan Neal by next Wednesday, and then obviously Darnell Wright will make his decision in a couple months. So they'll have time, if they need to circle back and really push for him. Not that they're not already really pushing for Darnell Wright, but they won't be completely left out of adding any more offensive linemen if they were to miss on Evan Neal, which I don't see happening. But this is recruiting; anything can happen.
Evan Neal's teammate there at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, Hank, Trey Sanders, the 5-star running back. Do things still sit pretty well with the Crimson Tide where he's concerned?
Yeah, that's another thing. He and Trey Sanders joined Evan Neal on the official visit to Georgia over the weekend, and there's a lot of buzz around Georgia. I mean, really, if you watch these guys take visits, there's buzz about whichever school they visit last. And obviously, there's very few boring official visits. I think recruits typically have great times. That visit high kind of lasts through Monday or Tuesday of the following week. So I think that's kind of what's happening with Trey Sanders right now. All the talk up until this weekend, Bama's primary competition for him, Florida with his brother on the team, Texas. He's a big fan of the Longhorns, but it's all kind of come back to Alabama. I still think Alabama's in a good spot for him. We've seen them kind of stay after other running backs. They hosted a 3-star running back named DJ Williams over the weekend on an official visit. They have yet to offer him. I think that may be a telling sign of kind of where things stand as far as how Alabama feels about their running back recruiting right now. So we'll watch him. Trey Sanders is expected at Florida this weekend, and he's making an announcement on December 19th as well. I still think Bama's in a good spot for him. There was some talk about when Mike Locksley left, did that hurt Alabama? He's had a long-standing relationship with a lot of members on the Alabama staff, Tosh Lupoy, even Burton Burns, who's not even an on-the-field coach anymore. But Trey Sanders goes back a long ways with Alabama from when he was committed back in 2016. So I still think Bama's in good shape, and obviously they're going to have to keep working for him. He's making it interesting, but I think on signing day, Trey Sanders joins the class.
As much as we're talking about offensive guys right now, Hank, it's really, I think, some of these other defensive players to go along with the defensive backflips from over the weekend that are going to go a long way in defining how this class finishes up, specifically 5-star linebacker Nakobe Dean, who we've talked about extensively, and also defensive tackle Ishmael Sofsher over in Louisiana. How's Alabama setting up with those guys right now?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with those. Nakobe Dean, I think, is probably one of the biggest storylines, if not the biggest storyline to follow leading up to the early signing period. Today's essentially the last day of Nakobe Dean's recruitment. He's leaving for the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game tomorrow. He won't be able to, host coaches at home until, it's the last time he will, because he is signing early and he's enrolling early. The Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game is next Monday night, so it'll be the dead period by then. So today is effectively the last day of his recruitment. Alabama's going to see him today. This is another one of those Alabama-Georgia battles. Ole Miss is in there as well. They have his brother on their team. So it's going to be an interesting one to follow. I think we'll know more kind of where things stand with Nakobe tonight. He has a very close relationship with Pete Golding, Alabama's inside linebackers coach. So all this talk, about Pete Golding possibly going to Ole Miss, which is not true. They hired another defensive coordinator. And then, of course, Oklahoma kind of in the rumor mill right there with him too. But so that's kind of been something we're watching with Nakobe Dean. But, he has a very strong bond with the Alabama staff, with Nick Saban. There's a lot of reasons for optimism, I feel like, with Alabama and Nakobe Dean. But you can probably say the same thing about Georgia. And, of course, Ole Miss with him being from Mississippi and his family ties to the program. So Nakobe Dean, we'll see. I think Bama has a good shot for him. Ishmael Sofsher, he's not signing early, so he's going to be a guy we're going to be tracking in January. He hasn't taken an official visit to Alabama yet. He's actually only taken one official visit to Texas A&M. So we'll probably see him take 3 or 4 next month. But another guy I think Bama has a good shot at going head-to-head with LSU.
There you go. Hank South, I know you're extremely busy. Really appreciate you taking a few moments out of that busy schedule to join us today on Southern Fried Sports. Give Hank a follow on Twitter as well, at Hank South 247. Check out that Tuesday recruiting thread right now at BamaOnline.com. It's on the roundtable at BOL. It's there for VIP subscribers, VIP members of BamaOnline.com. Literally minute-to-minute updates from Hank South on Alabama's football recruiting effort. As always, thanks a lot, Hank.
Absolutely. Thanks, Travis.